So the Nintendo Switch 2 came out about a month ago, and so far I'm loving it. And I'll get a review out of it sometime in a month or two. But why are so many people hating on it? I think it's mainly the price increase of the console and everything that goes with it. And that price increase kind of signals that Nintendo is kind of moving away from the philosophy of Gumpei Yokoi and all the things he stood for. So you're wondering who the heck is Gumpei Yokoi? Well, everyone knows who Shigeru Miyamoto is, but there wouldn't have been a Nintendo for him to be hired onto to create the Mario and Zelda franchise if Gunpei hadn't been there. Basically, he was Nintendo's maintenance man, and according to the legend, Nintendo was on hard financial times when the CEO caught him with the device he made to pass the downtime on the job. The CEO told him to go to their toy department so they could mass produce said device, and Nintendo created the Ultra Hand, and it became a huge success, saving the company from bankruptcy. Later on, Yokoi would notice people playing with calculators on the subway. He would again go to the CEO, told him what he found, asked him if there was any ways they could make a game profiting off of this, and they ended up making the Game & Watch another huge hit. However, his philosophies really showed up when the Game Boy came along, and it really comes into the fullness here, and we see Nintendo fully embracing it with the Game Boy. So, what made the Game Boy unique? You see, kids, those black and white or green and black Game Boy games in the ultra small screen of the Game Boy, they weren't put out there because that's what the best Nintendo could do at the time. Fully colored, backlit screens were available. The Atari Lynx released only a few months after the Game Boy and had a fully colored, backlit screen. It also cost more than twice the price of the Game Boy and had a very crappy battery life. While the Game Boy was cheap enough to get your games with cheap games, it's because of this that Nintendo was able to dominate the market against the Lynx and later the Game Gear. Yokoi unfortunately left Nintendo after the Virtual Boy disaster and was hit by a car in 1997. So why does this philosophy matter now, if he's been gone that long? Well, the next CEO, Satoru Iwata, who came in around the early 2000s, took his philosophy on handhelds and expanded it to the rest of Nintendo in a big way. Iwata created the DS, which was Nintendo's best-selling system using that philosophy. It was less powerful than its competitor, the PSP, but it had dual screens, touch screens, before the iPhone was released, so that made it big, and a microphone, and it was a creative hit. The Wii motion controls were also a big hit in their own way. The 3DS, although created with the 3D screen, was a mixed bag and therefore didn't sell as well. And then the Wii U, which was a bust. And since I've seen some younger YouTubers say it was because it was a more powerful Wii, no kids, it was still inventive. Name another game console that came with its own touchscreen pad. And yeah, you'll see where the faults lie with that. Nintendo was trying to create something new. They just created something no one wanted for the price. If the Wii U was a buffed up Wii with the hard drive so I could download demos, a Pro controller so developers could make regular controls, but Nintendo still focused on the Wii motion controls, I think it would have been a moderate success. But that's just one example of Nintendo's creativity not always coming to full fluctuation, and I'll get into that a bit later. But it is kind of unfortunate that Iwata's reign as Nintendo's CEO came to an end with the Wii U because rumors had it he was still finalizing specs for the Nintendo Switch on his hospital bed, and the Nintendo Switch still uses Yokoi's philosophy. The original Switch tech was already old when it came out. It's why Nintendo could sell their hardware, this hybrid gaming device, for such a cheap price. While everyone was at $400 or $500, Nintendo was at $300 with the Switch, and you could take the Switch on the road with you. But being underpowered did come with its own problems. Their flagship title, Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, had some frame rate issues, stuttering, and was kind of unstable in its performance, so that was the downside. Anyways, this leads us to today. New leadership that's a generation from the old toy Nintendo means Nintendo is going into a new direction, and I don't know how to feel about it either. Also, I think people are trying to eat their cake and still have it too. You want a bigger screen, you want it to compete with PS5, well, guess what, kids? It's gonna cost you more. At the same time, I do still want Nintendo to create and be able to do cheap stuff. Yes, $80 for Mario Kart is too much, but I kinda understanding their reason. People are going to buy it, the packing with that price, but I also want them to make $50 2D Mario games. Show me what you're planning on doing with that variable pricing. Also, Nintendo can still be innovative in their own way, and again, just like the Wii U, that's not always a good thing. Take a look at Alarmo, for example. Did anyone want an alarm clock in today's age? Most people don't use alarm clocks. We use our phones, and sometimes I still even use my 3DS. And Alarmo is a good example where innovation isn't always necessarily a good thing if you're innovating things people don't want. I would also like to ask the crowd that firmly believe Nintendo should step away from hybrid and do something else. Why? The Switch is the second best selling console ever. Why would you want to do something unproven, risky, when what people want is known and how to make the money is easy? You just release a more powerful Switch, which is what Nintendo did. Anyways, my personal thoughts are is I understand both sides. Those who want a more powerful Switch and like the idea and don't want to improve upon perfection, which is what the Switch 2 gives us. It gives us a more powerful Switch that can play games more smoothly and keep up with modern day consoles, and still keep things simple on the go. And the other side who wants them to keep the toy mentality for two good reasons. Number one, having a moderately cheap alternative to have a second console and something to give the kids is always preferable. But number two is that Nintendo's innovations do change the game industry, and there's nothing about the Switch 2 controllers that really change much. Yes, it can be used as a mouse. Hopefully that means some RTS games hit the Switch 2, but there's nothing much there. Their HD rumble on it is really nice, but beyond that, I'm not seeing much here. And this is important because I do also get kind of annoyed by the folks who are like, Nintendo needs to make normal controllers. Okay, you like the fact that digital control pads exist? Guess what? Nintendo did that while everyone was making joysticks. You like the fact that it's not in the center, but they're on the left side of the controller? Guess what? Nintendo did that when everyone was making it on the center. You like those shoulder buttons? Guess what? Nintendo did that when people were making shoulder buttons. You like the diamond control scheme that the regular controllers have? Guess what? They're an improvement on the Super Nintendo, which Nintendo did. Their competitors were just kind of laying them out like arcade buttons. You like rumble in your controllers? Guess what? Nintendo did that. You like the analog stick for 3D games? Guess what? Nintendo did that. You like wireless Bluetooth controllers as well as analog on your shoulder sticks? Guess what? Nintendo did that. That's them not making normal controllers, folks. They do improve upon the game industry when they're allowed to be creative. And going this way where they're just building powerful versions of the Switch and not adding anything new does take away from the game industry. Do I blame Nintendo for making a more powerful version of the Switch with the Switch 2 and not reinventing the wheel? No, I think that's what people wanted. But do I hope Nintendo still creates other products that change the game industry and can be cheaper and more focused on family? Yes, I do. But I don't think the Switch 2 is going to destroy the game industry either. As far as them being anti-consumer, yes and no. There's certain things about it where I could argue. I think the Switch Welcome Tour is one hell of a tech demo. It's a tech demo that should have been free. You want people to know what the features on your systems do. So when you describe it to them, they understand. Oh ho, so this is what frame rate means. Oh ho, so this is what your HD Rumble does. Anyways, my thoughts are is I love the Switch 2. I think it's gonna sell gangbusters. It's not gonna hit quite the heights as the Nintendo Switch, but anyone running around saying that the Nintendo Switch 2 is the next Wii U is full of themselves. Anyone who says that the Wii U wasn't inventive and that's why it fails also doesn't know what the Wii U was and deserves an automatic thumbs down, in my opinion. Anyways, this is Tommy. Let me know what your thoughts are. Do you think Nintendo should stick more with the toy maker philosophy, or do you think they should be more into the video game space and get higher tech specs? Let me know in the comments below, and please leave a like and subscribe.